Hi, everyone. My name is Louise Jackson. I'm with the Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. I'm going to give you all a couple of seconds to start trickling into the session. While you're doing so, I'd just like to warmly welcome you. Again, Louise Jackson. I am the Director of Alumni Career and Education at the Alumni Association here at U of M. It's really great to have all the Wolverines with us today. You can go ahead and jump in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. We'd really love to know all of the Wolverines throughout the world. Some of you are global, some of you are domestic within the US. Love to kind of have you chime in and let us know where you're calling in from. Today, we're going to be diving into this really interesting topic related to perfectionism and your career. Before we jump into that, thank you, Deborah. Deborah's calling in from Ann Arbor. Welcome to the session, Deborah. Really good to have you with us. Before we jump in, just a heads up, we do want you to make sure you get those questions into the Q&A feature. So make sure you use that QA feature. Sometimes if you do post those questions into the chat feature, they may sometimes get lost. There's a lot of resources that we mentioned in the chat feature. So make sure you use that Q&A feature so that I can make sure I can get to your question and not miss your question if you get that in. We also are recording the session, so do look out for that email from the Alumni Career Program. We're going to do our best to get the recording to you in a follow-up email. We also are going to be sending an email with the list of resources that we mentioned today. Hi there, Matt. So Matt is calling in from Chicago. Pleasure to have you with us. So jump into that chat and let us know where you're calling in from. Really excited to see. It looks like we have at least 51 participants in the session so far. All right, another one from Ann Arbor. Thanks so much, Haley, calling in from Ann Arbor. More Ann Arbor, so lots of Southeast Michigan. Knowing that we're here, we've got Saginaw, awesome. St. Paul, New Jersey, awesome. Muskegon, fantastic. Chicagoland, another Chicago. Ypsi, great. Cedar Rapids, Detroit, Kalamazoo, San Francisco, California. Newton, Massachusetts, very cool. Chicago, Cambridge. Okay, awesome. Lots from the East Coast as well. Lansing, Michigan. Well, welcome everybody. I think this is going to be a really good session. Zealand, thank you so much, Jackie. My apologies, I'm from South Africa. We say Jacqueline, but Jacqueline is how it's pronounced here sometimes. So Jacqueline, thank you for calling in. So we're going to jump into the session topic. Before we get into the meat of the session, I really wanted to start the session just with a couple of things. The first thing I wanted to mention is that I am not a clinician, meaning I am not a therapist. I am not a psychologist. I am a career coach. And what I see with a lot of the alumni that reach out to us for support is a struggle with some issues, a lot of them which really can be sourced to inner work. And so I really help our alumni as well as individuals figure out an increase in self-understanding. And one of the pieces that I've noticed is this perfectionism piece. So I wanted to first and foremost mention that I am addressing this issue not as a therapist. If there is absolutely anyone in the session who needs deeper clinical services, please reach out to your medical practitioner, your healthcare provider. Perfectionism has been correlated and linked to mental health challenges. We also know that the last 2 to 3 years have been significant on multiple fronts. So strongly encourage you to reach out for that professional support. Again, I'm addressing this as a career coach, not as a therapist. So just wanted to start the session by putting that out there. A little bit about me. I have my master's in adult development here from the University of Michigan, and I've worked in the career space for the last 12 years and help together with Brooke, who's also on the line, lead and manage our alumni career program. Really excited for this topic. So let's dive into this topic of perfectionism and your career, and really kind of how do we understand it and how do we harness it and manage it if we do have that tendency. So I wanted to start the session by telling a short little story about an individual who struggled with perfectionism. So the story goes as follows. A professor was teaching a class. It was a class on literature. Most of the individuals in the class would sort of zone out as soon as a discussion of Moby Dick or Emerson's essays was being discussed with a glazed over perspective. But there was one particular student And in the story, we'll call him Roy. Roy was one of those exceptional students. Really, he would answer questions, and his fellow classmates would sort of listen with a mixture of sort of perplexity and awe. Oh my goodness, where does Roy come from? Just, really an exceptional insight that Roy was able to provide in the class. As the term progressed and papers were due, Roy would show up at office hours with his professor, and he would ask for extensions. His professor would sort of carefully try to coach him and say, it doesn't need to be perfect, simply get it in. But Roy would obviously lead with, it's far from perfect. And despite the fact that every time he got a reduced grades because his papers were late, Roy's work still was really exceptional. As the term progressed and Roy's career progressed within higher education, he went on to do a master's degree. And as the story closes, Roy showed up to see one of his professors, one of his advisors, about his master's degree dissertation. It was the final sort of capstone project. Roy was stepped into the office hours. He said, I'm fine, but I just want you to know I need an extension. Obviously, his professor sort of tried to coach him and sort of remonstrate with him and say, hey, this isn't your life's work. It's simply your final dissertation. The long and short of it is Roy, ultimately, it turned out, actually deleted his entire master's degree dissertation because he felt he couldn't subject his faculty member, his advisor, his professor to reading it. And his response was, trust me, it's a world away from perfection. It's not even in the same galaxy. He went ahead and deleted all 20,000 words. Obviously, this caused significant impact to him. He was not able to graduate. And so this story really sort of is a stark warning to us, I would say, potentially, of the impact of perfectionism. This young individual was obviously an exceptional young student, really so promising, but he was caught in this trap of perfectionism and the ways in which it impacted his self-worth and his contribution and his growth as a professional. So let's dive into what I typically see with alumni who come to us or with those that I've coached in the career space. So this is a typical career arc, and by no means is this, again, real life is really messy. We know that people have very haphazard and varied career journeys, but on average, I would say most individuals follow some form of this arc. So they go through an early stage of their career where they focus on skill building. This is usually where you're either at university or you're really building your skill set. During that time period, there's a strong encouragement to explore career options and to increase your self-understanding. So to really come to a sense of solidarity internally as to what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you may not be as good at. Then we get through the period of sort of hitting your stride as you get into that mid-career, making your mark in your career. And then finally, what we see with a lot of individuals is that encore stage where a lot of individuals focus on finding meaning in their life. Maybe they've had a successful career, and then they really sort of view that early retirement or even pre-retirement stage of how can I give back and sort of what's next from me. So we talk about encore careers. What I typically find with individuals who may struggle in this space with perfectionism is they haven't taken the time to really reflect and improve self-understanding. And what happens with individuals, if they really haven't given themselves the space to do so, is they may start to hit these speed bumps as they progress in their career. So a healthy career development really unfolds. And as it unfolds, there should be an increase of self-awareness, and as a result, an increase in skill as to how we interact with our environment. As you progress in your career, potentially the environment in which you're working sometimes get more and more complex. The relationships, the demands of the work may become more complex. And so your self-awareness and your self-actualization needs to be solidified. Now, like I mentioned, if we haven't taken the time to do that work, that's where sometimes we struggle with hitting our stride, making a mark, or even giving back. So really, this session is focused on giving ourselves an opportunity in the space to say, let's think about this. Let's do some self-work and let's figure out where those gaps might meet. Maybe it's, in this case, perfectionism, so that we can make sure we avoid those scenarios where suddenly you hit a crisis as you're trying to hit your stride and you can't really figure out why you're having the challenges that you're having. All right. And a lot of this, again, I would say is fairly typical early careers. So in other words, that achieve a stage. So often I see with our alumni, they've had one or two jobs, they're working really hard, they're really kind of pushing to make a good impression in the early part of their career, but they may not have taken that time again to focus on their reflection and that increased self-awareness. All right. So let's dive into the next portion. So I would like everyone to take a second here to really do a little bit of a reflective exercise on some of the items that are listed in this checklist. So if any of these sort of resonate and you say to yourself, that might be me. So I would say definitely this was me, especially earlier on in my career. There was a lot of excessive work, I would say, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., repeatedly checking work for mistakes. And by that, I mean, not necessarily just the typical QA, but the kind of repeat checking that almost becomes onerous. Difficulty finding satisfaction with work being good enough, having trouble really handing work in and letting it go. Spending a lot of time laboring on tasks that could be done fairly quickly. So there are certain decisions that need to be made at work that should be done fast, right? We shouldn't spend too much time on them. So if you do want to read a good book on that, you can read Think Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. But there are certain things that we do at work that we should do quickly. But if you're spending a lot of time laboring on things and doing them slowly, that can become exhausting. Procrastination is another good indicator that you may be struggling with a tendency toward perfectionism. So having, again, with the example, the story we started out with the student who really was consistently asking for those extensions and really having a very hard time handing things off and letting them go, procrastinating that work because it was never good enough. Being excessively anxious about work performance and about being judged or even receiving feedback. Having trouble seeing the broader context of the work that we're accomplishing, trouble making decisions, a lot of fear around making the wrong decision. Again, we've talked about procrastination, but this comes into these next 3 bullets. There's a strong sense of avoidance. It might be avoidance of new things, of which success is not guaranteed, avoidance of feedback and performance appraisals, avoidance, again, of that situation where your performance may be evaluated or judged. Avoiding opportunities that might be challenging. And then the last one, potentially seeking a ton of reassurance about the quality of your work or performance. So it may not be all of these, but this is at least a good start for you on reflectively thinking about, do I struggle with any one of these? Is this me? I will just say right off the bat, yes, this is me. I think, again, I'm a work in progress, just like you all, and we're all here to learn together. So if this is you, don't worry. We're here to figure it out together as a community. So let's talk a little bit about how perfectionism is different from striving for excellence. And this is a question that I think is definitely worth us addressing. So I think there may be sometimes this misconception that perfectionism and striving for excellence are the same thing. And I would starkly say, no, they are not. It's okay for organizations or individuals to have a positive attempt to strive for excellence. And we're going to talk a little bit about how they're different and what those differences are. So someone who struggles with perfectionism, or an organization that has a culture of perfectionism, believes that everything must be perfect all the time. How's that different from someone who strives for excellence? Someone who strives for excellence, they understand that there are situations that call for perfection. We think about something such as surgery. You do not want to go into surgery if you know that your surgeon is anything but, really brilliant, right? But there are other situations that really don't call for perfection. And so we recognize someone who strives for excellence sees that nuance and is able to understand that nuance. So someone who struggles with perfectionism, they spend an excessive amount of time on trivial problems, versus the difference, striving for excellence is a focus on important problems. We may be those in the perfectionist category who set impossible standards for success and then feel upset when those standards are not met, either by self or by others. Someone who has a striving for excellence mindset or approach says, we're going to set those standards. They may be challenging, but we know they're achievable. And we definitely give ourselves the space to say we're content when we achieve those goals. So I think pausing when we do get to a certain point, giving ourselves at an organization an opportunity to say, that was great work, well done, whether it's to ourselves or to others. So standards might be challenging, but they're achievable. And then we're content when we meet those. So again, we give ourselves the space to congratulate ourselves on hard work that was done and successful. For those who struggle with perfectionism, mistakes are viewed as a sign of inadequacy. So they're viewed as failures, contrasting with those who view mistakes as failures. They're not viewed as failures, but a normal part of the growth, profile. So in other words, I may have made a mistake. I can learn from it. So there's a growth mentality that we bring to making mistakes. Perfectionists are motivated. Again, there's an extrinsic aspect to this. They're motivated by fear of failure, criticism, or rejection. The intrinsic aspect of striving for excellence is motivated by a potential for happiness or growth. So in other words, the driver of this behavior is different for these two factors. One is driven by an extrinsic fear of some kind of repercussion, again, stick carrot sort of mentality. The other individual is motivated by growth, happiness. One of the most important ones that I'd like to focus on here is fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So individuals who struggle with perfectionism usually struggle with a fixed mindset approach. They would say, I'm either naturally intelligent or I'm not. I'm simply going to succeed or I'm not. Everything is viewed in very clear black and white dichotomous terms. Someone who has a growth mindset has said, I've made a conscious decision to view my abilities as dynamic assets that can be developed or that are continually developing. In other words, I can learn. I may not be an expert at XYZ, but I can learn XYZ. So again, or I may have made a mistake, but I can learn. So there's a very conscious decision made to approach life with a growth mindset. So very, very important. Probably one of the key differences is this notion of growth versus fixed mindset. And then this last portion, avoidance of new things as success is not guaranteed. And this is due to that fear of failure. This is sometimes illustrated by procrastination. Contrasting to someone who views striving for excellence, new work can be challenging. It can even be a little scary. It's okay. I talked to some colleagues about what it's like to start a new job. All of us have been in those shoes. We want to make a good impression at the beginning. We usually tend to work a little harder in the first part of a role. New work can be challenging. It might even be scary. That scary can exist together with confidence. So confidence and fear can exist in the same ecosystem, and they're not, again, motivated by fear of failure, rejection. So again, the motive and the driver is different here. So very important to draw this distinction between these two. All right. So in sum, I would like to say healthy strivers, those individuals who have a growth mindset, differ from perfectionism in their ability to succeed or fail without it impacting their sense of self-worth. And this is probably the biggest takeaway for us as those who are recovering perfectionists, to say, I may make mistakes. Actually, mistakes are going to happen, but I really need to realize those mistakes do not impact my sense of self-worth, my sense of value to my organization and to myself. That my self-worth is assured irrespective of whether I succeed or fail. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but I think it's really important to sort of remember this, that at the center of this, there needs to be an anchor within our being that says, I'm worth it, and my worth is determined by my growth mindset, by my ability to learn, by my commitment, and by my emotional intelligence, and is not determined by my organization or whether I have succeeded and or failed at certain things. Again, moving away from that fixed mindset approach. So there's a ton of research out there on perfectionism. I'm not going to spend the majority of the session is really going to be talking about how we manage perfectionism. It's not going to be to dig into the research, but for those of you who are interested, I'm going to reference a couple of pieces that you can take a look at. So there's self-oriented perfectionist. This is the perfectionism that is an obligation to become that idealized version of yourself. We know there's a ton of self-help books out there. How are you happier? How are you fitter? How are you richer? How are you more successful? Again, fill in the adjective of your choice. But that's the self-oriented driver. There's socially prescribed perfectionism. We do know, of course, in our day and age, we've got TikTok, Instagram, I would say even LinkedIn, looking at individuals' profiles that we may come across, where there's this constant sort of barrage of socially prescribed comparison that we're constantly drawing that leaves us trying to live up to the expectations of society. So there's that aspect of perfectionism. And then the last piece is other-oriented perfectionism. So this is usually where that persecuting voice is not only turned inward, but it's turned outward to others. So in other words, now others are having to live up to impossible standards as well as yourself. We know it's very hard to distinguish between self-oriented and other-oriented perfectionism. And that's mainly just because in real life, you can't distinguish between those internal and external voices. We know that sometimes those feelings are mixed. But what we do know, at least from a psychology perspective, is that disappointment in self is sometimes then turned on others. So rather than it being addressed in ourselves, and this goes back again to my reference of the career arc, those who have taken the time to deeply understand themselves and reflect on that are more likely to be better managers. They're going to be more satisfied in their career. And it's because they've taken the time to understand what these root cause issues are. If we don't take the time to do that kind of coaching work or reflective work, sometimes that's really where we hit these speed bumps. Suddenly, again, that other-oriented perfectionism is really a reflection of the self and projecting that failure or disappointment in ourselves, but we're projecting it onto others. There's some great research out there on Curran and Hill, and Brooke, my colleague, can post that in the chat. But if you do want to take a look at them, they are they've increasingly reported an exponential rise in perfectionism, specifically among younger generations. There's an increased demand for social and economic parameters. I mean, we're talking ranking of schools, we're talking an increase in testing and education, we're talking the rise of social media. There are so many different factors that go into this. Long and short is there's been a significant increase in perfectionism. There's also a ton of research on perfectionism in the workplace. We do know that those who are rated as workaholics, typically, again, we like to think that this is positive, but it actually has very negative impacts for the individual and the organization. Those who score high as workaholics, as well as scored high in perfectionism, tend to have lower job satisfaction. They have less joy at work, and they struggle with managerial tasks such as delegation. So there's a ton of great research on this. As I mentioned earlier, when I kicked off and talked about the fact that, of course, we know this is a significant issue. The research indicates that any form of perfectionism has led to all manner of challenging mental health concerns. These include depression, stress, anxiety, low self-esteem, burnout, physical health complications, and obviously in extreme cases, even suicide. So again, like I mentioned, please make sure if you're struggling more deeply with this, make sure you get the help you need, reach out to your healthcare provider. The long and short of it is, initially there was research that was done on perfectionism, and it was thought to be potentially there were normal or adaptive forms of perfectionism, meaning it wasn't all unhealthy. The more recent research is indicating that in most of its forms, it's actually maladaptive. Even if we think initially that it has a healthy component to it, it's almost always can result in unhealthy tendencies. And I want to reference the example of, I don't know how many of you have been in interviews where you get asked the question of, tell me about your greatest weakness. I know one of our great responses has always been, well, I struggle with perfectionism. And that's because secretly, I think there is potentially a cultural norm that says, perfectionism is not actually a weakness, it's actually a strength. And I'm here to tell everyone that's not true. It is, I wouldn't even couch it in strength weakness terminology as much as it is something that we can address within ourselves and that we can work on to approach. So we want to identify it, label it, so that we're empowered to understand it and manage it. All right, so how do we manage it? Here's the good stuff. This is really the meat of this session. I want you all to walk away with some solid action items. I want you to manage your stinker. So you need to name this beast, whatever it is. Call it stinker, call it Darth. Name the beast, the inner critic. This allows you, number one, to identify it. And that's very empowering. The act of naming it gives it a certain measure of psychological distance. So if you're like me and you're feeling really sick, but you are still planning to do that meeting, name that stinker that's making you attend that meeting when you know you shouldn't be attending that meeting. Name it and say, not today, stinker, not going to do it. So name your inner critic. That's the first thing. And it may sound silly, but I would strongly encourage you to think about practicing this and to even do it. The second thing I want you to think about doing, and I want you to even write all of these down. Again, we're going to get this deck out to you, is practice the 10-10-10 rule. Ask yourself if this is going to impact me or really matter 10 weeks, 10 months, or 10 years from now. In most cases, the answer is going to be no. It's not going to matter. Stick that up, write it on a sticky note, put it up on your desktop at work. Remember this question as you're about to make that decision. 10-10-10. Is it going to matter 10 weeks, 10 months, or 10 years from now? Time management. Overthinking, and thus a tendency toward perfectionism, expands to the time that you allow it. It expands to the time you allow it. So we need to manage your time, my time. If I need to make a core leadership decision or something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, I need to put time constraints on it. Put something in your calendar that specifically identifies, today, I'm going to take 5 or 10 minutes to make that decision. Today, I'm going to take an hour to research that topic. So calendaring and scheduling, bounding those time slots for you really can, again, put boundaries to the work. So you're only allowing that overthinking for that period of time. It's very important. Again, overthinking expands to the time that you allow it. So use calendaring and scheduling very, very wisely. Try to move from an everything matters to a what matters most mindset. So this is part of the Pareto principle that we know that's out there, that roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of causes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we get into growth mindsets, because Pareto principle falls into that. But embracing that growth mindset of saying, I may make mistakes, actually, I'm going to make mistakes, but those mistakes are learning opportunities versus a definitively as failure. So let's talk a little bit about growth mindset. It's a really, really important factor here, and I want to emphasize it. If you do want to read any additional resources about growth mindset, the forerunner or thought leader on this topic is S Dweck. Take a look at her book, Mindset. It's one of the big books on mindset that you can read. We really want to focus. So as you can see in this little imagery, and I like this quote because I think it really speaks to what we're trying to accomplish. Rather than this fixed mindset of saying, I'm either going to succeed or fail, and I'm caught in this sort of endless feedback loop of fail, try to succeed, fail. We want to evolve. So we don't want to just revolve round and round. We, as mistakes happen, say, what did I learn from it? And can I grow with that? So again, focus on that growth mindset. I would preface this by saying some of us have grown up potentially in home environments or even in school environments where there's a strong emphasis on a fixed mindset. Either you are intelligent or you're not. You're simply going to succeed or you're not. Unfortunately, some of us have really been under that kind of, in that kind of environment for a really long time. But we know we can reestablish your mind and your habits. 30 days is all it takes. So give yourself 30 days Put a little sticky note up on your computer, growth mindset, and reflect on this every single day. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about how you can actually do that by doing what we call a failure reframe. Before we dive into this failure reframe, Brooke, my colleague, is going to pop something in the chat there related to the actual worksheet that you all can print out, you can copy, you can do the failure reframe exercise. But the goal of this failure reframe is really for us, again, going back to the former slide, is for us to not just revolve round and around, stuck in a fixed mindset approach. We want to evolve and we want to grow. And how do we do that? How do we reframe mistakes that we've made in our professional lives, in our careers? So I want you to think a little bit about this. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this, but I would encourage you to strongly do this work on your own if this is something you've struggled with. When you think about your failures, I want you to think about them in 3 categories. Was this mistake a screw up? A screw up is a simple mistake that you normally get right. Things like you sent an email with the wrong date for a meeting, you reserved the wrong room, maybe there was a mistake in an email you sent. They may be even bigger things, but on average, they're screw ups. They're small mistakes that you typically get right. And it's not that you can't do better. They're mistakes. That's what they are. They're screw ups. Your best response in this case is to acknowledge the mistake, to acknowledge the screw up, apologize if needed, and move on. So identify if you did this failure reframe exercise, was it a screw up? The second aspect of this is, was this mistake, this failure, an abiding weakness? So this is where a career coach can really kind of help you do some reflection, some assessments on this. But these are typically mistakes that you're real familiar with. They're your friends. You've struggled with this issue for a really long time. They're mistakes that you've seen over and over again. You've tried to correct them. You've tried to improve them as much as possible, but it's simply not your strength. I would strongly encourage you, if you're a zebra, you're a zebra. Stop trying to be a cheetah. Stop trying to be a tiger. Stop trying to be something else. So that's where assessment and career coaching can help you really understand, okay, this is who I am. These are my strengths. And if you are in a career where you're consistently being asked to do things that are abiding weaknesses for you, that's going to be a real struggle. So your response here is, we're not suggesting that you just accept mediocre performance, but there's no upside to you trying to be what you're not. The best strategy here is to avoid situations that prompt you to make this mistake. You know what's going to happen. You know it's not a strength. What can you do? So this may be extreme, like career change. And this is something, again, we're not going to do a career change session here, but I want you to think about, is this failure an abiding weakness? Okay, then the third piece is, and this is really where you should be focusing your energy, failures that didn't have to happen or happen next time. The cause of these failures is identifiable. Identifiable is key. The cause of these failures is identifiable, and so a fix is available. Your goal is to really direct your attention not to screw ups and weaknesses, to number 1 and number 2, but really to focus on growth opportunities. What are those areas within my current role or in my organization where I can direct my attention? And I can say, I can identify why this happened, and I can make sure this is not a pattern. It's not going to happen again. Management, typically, they look for patterns, right? So I want you to do a failure reframe. Keep this log, do it for a week or 2, maybe even 3 or 4. And you're really going to start to see a sense. The weaknesses, they're going to give you a strong sense of, hey, maybe this career is not for me. Maybe it's really not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be really good at this, but it's an abiding weakness. I'm a zebra and I'm trying to be a cheetah. Maybe there are a few things that are screw ups, right? That's okay. Screw ups, the main thing with screw ups is really moving on from them. But the pieces we want to focus your effort on are growth opportunities. And so identifying these 3 is really going to help the perfectionist figure out, again, we're trying to change that mindset to growth mindset. So we want to focus on growth opportunities. All right. if you are an employer or a manager or an organization, I would strongly encourage you to think about managing perfectionists on your team, or maybe even among yourself, or even if there's a culture of perfectionism at your organization. What are some of the ways that you can manage perfectionism? And we know the cost is high for organizations. We have higher burnout, we have higher stress, higher turnover for staff. So you may be rewarded with extraordinary performance at the beginning, but in the long term, the cost is high for this focus. So celebrate those small wins. Make sure you always build that in. Understand there's a difference between success, again, what we mentioned at the beginning, striving for excellence and perfectionism. So celebrate that striving for excellence, but make sure that there's a clear understanding that those two are very different. Applaud the effort and not just the outcome. So as your team is working really hard, make sure you're providing those small moments. Great job, good work. Really appreciate that you did this. Thank you so much for handling that gracefully. Applaud the effort that's put into the work and not just only the outcome. Encourage prioritization. You need to practice what you preach. So prioritize the work. And if there is a lot of work being done, really encourage that and even practice that yourself. And then the last piece, of course, is humanity and empathy to your team. So lead with authentic connection. Don't be afraid to reveal the moments where you've had a screw up, where you have potentially an abiding weakness, how you've managed that, and even mistakes you've made and how you've learned from those. So illustrate that you yourself are learning and growing and have adopted a growth mindset approach to this work. All right. We're going to go ahead and do an energy engagement exercise. So I'm going to go ahead. I posted this up there. My colleague Brooke is going to share a link to the actual PDF in the chat. You can go ahead and pull it up. But I would like everybody to spend a moment or two thinking about your energy engagement. So I want you to think of 10 tasks that you complete in a professional setting. I want you to think about if the work that you're doing provides energy. Does it energize you or does it deplete you? Does it drain you? And draw a bar on this bar graph here. So here's a sample of how it would actually look. This is a real messy sample of my own. You can see career coaching calls, definitely energizing for me. Presentations and strategy, ho-hum, somewhere in the middle. Reading, career development, probably somewhere about there. So again, going back to that, make sure you draft out 10 work-related things that you do. Ask yourself, does it energize you? Does it deplete you? The goal of this exercise is for you to start finding patterns between the things that do energize you and the things that do drain you. And then we're going to do further exercises to how you can take the failure log that we talked about earlier, the energy engagement, and we can actually incorporate both of that insight and reflective best practice into an improved self-understanding that will help you map out some career design. So I'm going to give everybody, my clock says 12:36. I'm going to give everybody till, I would say 7 minutes. I know it's not as long as I would like it to be, maybe let's say 8 minutes on the clock, to go ahead and actually do this right now. Take a moment. Again, you should have the link to this PDF. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I'll actually turn off my webcam. And I want you to do this exercise. So 8 minutes starting now. So I thought I'd pop in and just mention, for some of you who may be new or just jumped in, we are doing an energy engagement worksheet. So my colleague Brooke did post that in the chat. You can go ahead and jump on and get a copy of that. I would strongly encourage you to assess all the different work tasks that you do. Don't spend too much time, again, overthinking it. Remember, overthinking expands to the time you allow it. Simply intuitively jot down 10 things that you do at work and ask yourself, does this thing energize me? Does this thing drain me? Then in that second bar, you'll notice, what do you notice about your energy patterns? You should start to notice certain kind of patterns here in the data. And then what can you do to make sure you improve your energy flows? And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we can utilize this exercise in some career design best practice. So we still have 2 minutes on the clock. I'll jump back off, but go ahead and start tying things up. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about how you can utilize this insight. All right, so you should be trying to sort of tie it up. Again, if you need a little bit more time here, please take a look at that worksheet. Again, Brooks popped it in the chat. Do this exercise. It can be really insightful. I had a great conversation a couple of weeks back with a Michigan alum who is a neurosurgeon. He said, I can be in the zone. I am energized when I'm doing surgery. I am just, it really kind of fills my bucket. However, when I'm looking at test results or slides or doing administrative tasks and recording, depletes me really low. It brings in the low energy. And we're talking about this more in the context of burnout, but I think the same message applies. We need to increase our self-understanding so that we can know what work energizes us, what work does not energize us. And now the question for us is, how do we incorporate or make sure that we are including the work that really gives us energy, that really fills our bucket, so that we're engaged? And again, we want to be motivated by that intrinsic motivation. All right, so just like some of you saw, this is a sample of my very own energy engagement assessment. And I actually included some personal things because I wanted to do this very holistically. So you can see, of course, childcare. My one colleague laughed. She said, it's like you drew the line and then you decided, childcare. It's not actually that energizing. Walking the dog, energizing. Maybe sometimes if my dog's being naughty, not so much. So really kind of use this exercise to improve your understanding of self can be helpful. So what do we do with this energy engagement map or worksheet? If you are interested in doing further reading on this, this is a book that was written by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett at Stanford University, and it's called Design Your Life. You can take a look at it. There's actually a bunch of free resources available on their website that could be useful to you. So how do we tie this all up? What are the tasks that give you energy? And what are the tasks that drain your energy? So if there is a task that drains your energy, can you delegate the task? Maybe if you're more advanced in your career and you're able to do so. You may find that if you are a team lead and you've hired someone who has a different strength than yours, they may, for example, love data. You may hate data. Maybe, giving them that opportunity to focus on that. if it is something that really drains you, or it's something that is not a strength, can you build in extra eyes or QA on the things that must do? So you're still doing them, but you're building in pieces to address the potential for mistakes. Do you create a side hustle? Do you continue on your career trajectory as is, but you start something on the side? So I would definitely say the gig economy used to be graphic designers and IT developers, and that is a thing of the past. You can find all manner of project work available to you that allows you to investigate, explore something that you've always kind of considered, but you've never had an option to do, that again can fill that bucket for you. Do you need to have a difficult conversation? Sometimes, as it pertains to work, we have to have difficult conversations with colleagues, with superiors, if there is either a lack of resources. So again, if the energy drainage is more due to systemic issues related to your workplace environment or your resource availability, sometimes you do have to have a difficult conversation. When you did your failure reframe exercise, again, I got a really great question in the chat related to how do I differentiate between mistakes that are failures that are that problem number 2. Remember, we talked about maybe you're a zebra, but you're trying to be a tiger. What are those issues and problems that are number 3? So number 3 is the growth opportunity mistakes, the growth opportunity failures. Sometimes we may not necessarily know what the difference is between 2 and 3. That's where we could work very closely together on assessments and utilizing that assessment insight to really help the individual identify what those strengths are, clarity for the individual related to self-understanding, self-actualization is really going to allow you to then say, oh, this was definitely a 2 versus this was a 3, meaning this was me trying to be a tiger when I'm a zebra versus this was a mistake that I can clearly identify. And I would say even the nature of that question is already indicative to me that it's probably a 3, at least a 2, meaning if you're struggling to know if it's a mistake due to an abiding weakness versus a mistake due to something that can be identifiable, remember the key piece is it can be identified. So if you can identify it, you can label it, it's type 3 versus type 2, but this is definitely something a coach can help someone with. So when you did that failure reframe exercise, remember, you're focusing on the 3rd type as a perfectionist. So the tie up here is take this energy insight. You should have better sense of what fills my bucket, what energizes me. You should have insight from your failure reframe exercise. Now I would encourage you to do what's called an Odyssey exercise. So what this is taking the time to really map out 3 potential career journeys and career pathways that incorporate your understanding of where you got energy. So for example, we know Louise gets a lot of energy, obviously, from coaching and helping others. How do I ensure that that's incorporated into my existing role? How does that look for option number 1, career journey, option number 2, career journey, and option number 3, career journey? We don't have the time to actually do an Odyssey exercise today, but Brooke is posting it into the chat. Definitely take the time to do an Odyssey exercise. It's going to give you a ton more insight about yourself that can be really helpful. So we've kind of gone quite far, but to tie everything up, I love this quote: perfectionism makes for a thin life, a life lived for what it isn't rather than what it is. And the career design that we've kind of touched on with the failure reframe is really to empower you to build a career and to build a life that is, and that you can enjoy and that you can be satisfied with. So we can talk a ton more about career design, but I really want to make sure that I have enough time for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of dive into those questions. Please make sure you get those popped in the chat. Again, this session is going to be recorded. All right. So Nicole, you had a question related to, and I'll read the question for the rest of the audience just so they can kind of hear what it sounds like. How do you recommend a recovering perfectionist interact with the approach to a career where you assume to have one specific goal and one specific plan to get to that goal, and allow for the more real messiness of the world. Nicole, I wanted to make sure I actually understood you properly. And so I'm actually going to go ahead, if you feel comfortable, and it's fine if you don't feel comfortable, but if you do feel comfortable, I was going to ask if you would be interested to unmute. Because again, I want to make sure that I understand your question. And the way I understand it is maybe you were thinking, hey, all my life I thought I was going to be an architect. And all of a sudden, real life happened, things got real messy, and I'm not going to be an architect. So I have given you permission to talk. If you want to chime in and just help explain your question a little further, maybe that can also be more insightful.
Yes, can you hear me, Louise?
Yes, I can. Awesome.
So I was more referencing the, usually when I've interacted with career coaches or organizational learning or any sort of career planning advice.
Yeah.
Everything is centered around sort of, okay, what's your career goal? Okay, let me set up all of these steps to get you to your career goal. And let's look at, okay, who do you need to network with? And let's get real specific.
Yeah.
And for me as a perfectionist, I don't necessarily have sort of one goal that I'm like, this is just get me to this. And how do you sort of navigate this career and get help and utilize some of the career resources without feeling like, if I don't do this exactly perfectly, if I don't have exactly five new networking contacts that I want to get next month, how do you still use that advice but allow for it to not be a perfect plan?
Yeah, I love that. I love that question. So I would say the first thing is we need to let go of any kind of sense that you cannot, that there's such a thing as a perfect career plan, number one. To your point, real life is messy. And the way we engage in it is messy. I would also say there's such a thing as the Renaissance person who's interested in lots of things. They may be interested in multifaceted career goals. And that is perfectly okay. So, to be interested in architecture and cooking and, all these things. So really remembering or kind of keep in mind that the professional life and even the personal life is really just one life. And so when you do that energy engagement kind of reflection, incorporate those personal pieces to that too, right? What are the things that give you energy? So again, you're looking at the whole, not just one aspect of that. Also be released from the expectation again that you have to have one career goal. I will say when it comes to more interview performance, negotiation, and actual placement, I do see people have more confidence and or feel more comfortable when they have one versus multifaceted career goals. That being said, some people have more comfort closing doors than others. For a lot of individuals, closing doors can become a very painful kind of experience. And so being okay to keep doors open is really okay. And I think that's also part of the great resignation and everything that's kind of happening in the world of work right now, or even what is a quiet quitting, is individuals are saying, we're still going to keep our job. Maybe we'll have multifaceted career goals. We're going to do the work that needs done, but we're not going to kill ourselves. We're going to do what needs done. We're going to be engaged. We're going to get those goals and metrics met, but we're going to do so on our terms. So I think that's definitely a part of that conversation. So I don't know. I would, number one, encourage you not to feel like you need to be locked into a box. It's okay if you've got doors open, totally fine. And then I would still do the mistakes log, even for within an existing role. And I don't know, Nicole, does that help you at all? Or am I just all over the place? Not sure if that's helpful to you. I'm going to pause there if you want to chime in. Again, want to make sure I'm getting you as much help as possible.
Yes, I just put it in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, and Nicole, please do reach out to us. We're here to help you. So more than happy to chat sort of offline about this. Really make sure that you get that help. Another one of our questions, to go back to it, was the question related to, and I'm going to go back to this portion of the session. Just give me a second here. Was how to identify the difference between weaknesses and growth opportunities. So one of the exercises I would encourage you to do to identify that is, Brooke can pop in the chat if you're interested. We have a guide to assessments. You can take a look at that. What I would do if I was this individual and I was struggling between knowing, is this an abiding weakness or is this a growth opportunity? I would do a couple of the different assessments that are out there. There's some really cheap free ones. I know the statisticians among us may say, well, maybe they're not entirely reliable or valid, but again, your goal for assessments is to use them as a reflective best practice. So if you did your Myers-Briggs type indicator, if you did your Strengths Finder through Gallup, if you did maybe the Career Leader, which is one we offer, any one of those, and you started a whiteboard, I have a whiteboard behind me, and you started kind of mapping out, okay, this is what MBTI gave me. This is what StrengthsFinder gave me. This is what Career Leader gave me. This is what Strong Interest Indicator gave me. What you should start to see together with an energy exercise is you should start to see themes between them. So that's going to be able to then give you that reliability and validity to say, okay, I'm seeing themes related to being energized when I work with people. I'm seeing themes related to being drained when I have to do, data analysis, or maybe it's the other way around. So again, what I would do is I would start to draft all of those, and a coach can help you identify those themes, but it's also something you can do yourself. So with any one of the free assessments that are out there, what you're going to get from that kind of exercise, for the person who asked about the difference between 2 and 3, is you should be able to then identify, is this an abiding weakness or is this a growth opportunity? And that kind of whiteboard exercise, looking for themes across assessment results, is going to allow you to say, not only am I energized by being with people, but I'm really good at relationship management. I'm less likely to make a mistake in this space. Or maybe it's the opposite. I'm low energy when I do presentations, when I manage people. It drains me. And I can also see that in my assessment results. So this is going to be an abiding weakness. How can I make sure that I don't put myself in a position where I'm being consistently required to do something that's saying, we want you to be a tiger when you're actually a zebra? So again, not sure if that was helpful. All right, we got a couple more questions. I'm going to try to get to them. I know we're at 1 o'clock. Free assessments such as Myers-Briggs available online for alumni. I would encourage you to take a look at all the free ones that are out there. Myers-Briggs, unfortunately, does have a fee associated with it. We at the Alumni Career Program do not provide the MBTI or Myers-Briggs. However, I do know that it is something you can do. I believe the cost is about $50. If you are recently graduated, so you're within 1 or 2 years of graduating from the University of Michigan, I do believe you still have access to the University Career Center that can provide the MBTI. So that is that answer to that question. How do you deal with perfection rooted in a strong sense of identity from your career and performance? This is exactly the question I was actually addressing earlier. So to go back to the quote that we referenced, the difference between a healthy striver and a perfectionist is a healthy striver is able to succeed or fail, but it doesn't impact their sense of self-worth or their identity. The challenge comes in when your career identity is so strongly tied to perfectionism and to success. That is where I see significant work from the individual in terms of a deep sense of identity issue, a deep sense of undervaluing yourself as a professional. So I would say this is mainly my experience as coach. If such an individual really struggled with this, a couple of pieces that I would recommend they do. They sound really simple, but a lot of us do these things. If you see someone doing something hard, and the first thought that you should have is, I can do that. Oh, I've always wanted to do career coaching and I see that they put this deck together. I can do that. Like, it's not that hard. So that's the first thing, is job shadowing, project shadowing, something that allows you exposure to people who are doing the work, and telling yourself, again, setting those brain patterns up of, I can do that. That looks like something I can do. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would encourage the individual to do is not to be afraid to get on the phone and conduct conversations with individuals who are doing those roles, asking questions, and again, then reaffirming that message of, hey, I can do that. I also find individuals who've been in roles for a long time, so let's say 5, 10, 15 years, what sometimes happens with those individuals is their sense of value, their sense of professional identity becomes so strongly tied to their existing employer, they're not able to sort of disassociate themselves from that. So I would say, and again, not always the case, but individuals who haven't taken the time, especially if they have been in roles for a really long period of time, to do some of these reflective exercises, to try do new things, to get on the phone with alumni who are doing things that they may want to explore, again, to re-solidify that sense of identity, that my identity is not tied to whether I succeed or fail. It's tied to me, who I am, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. I'm a zebra, and I'm very proud to be a zebra, right? As using that illustration. So that is that question. Hopefully that was helpful to you. So we're at the top of the hour. It's 1:04. I hope I got to all your questions. We will send the recording out, so please look out for that. We also are going to send a resource list in a follow-up email. So please make sure you take a look at that. And thank you so much, everybody. From one recovering perfectionist to another, I hope this was helpful to you. I'm rooting for you, and we at the Alumni Program are here for you. Please make sure you let us know how we did. We do have a little survey that we popped in the chat here. We really want to know if there are topics you'd like us to address or that have value to you. Let us know what they are. We definitely look at that feedback. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to sign off for now, but go blue.